Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm really excited to be talking today with Dr. Natasha Sriraman. My name is Dr. Archana Shrestha, and I'm one of the co-founders of the Women in White Coats blog, as well as the co-authors of the Chronicles of Women in White Coats. And I'm talking today with Dr. Natasha Sriraman, and she is also one of the co-authors of the Chronicles of Women in White Coats. And we wanted to just talk a little bit about what it's like to grow up with parents who are in the medical field. I grew up with my mom, who was a family medicine doctor, and Natasha also had both her parents as physicians. And so we kind of wanted to talk about what that's like and the influence that that can have on you. And it also kind of relates to one of the chapters I wrote in the Chronicles of Women in White Coats called The Family Business, where I kind of talk about what it was like growing up with a mom who was a physician and what kind of influence that had on me in choosing my own career as an emergency physician. So Natasha, thank you. Is it all right if I call you Natasha or Dr. Sri Raman?
Yeah. No, we've been friends now for a long time.
Yes, exactly. So, well, Natasha, I'll let you go ahead and share a little bit more about yourself and where you work and what field you're practicing in.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, Archana. As she said, I'm one of the co-authors of the Chronicles of Women in White Coats. So I met Archana last May at our book launch. I can't believe it's almost been a year and a half. And I am an associate professor of pediatrics at Eastern Virginia Medical School, and I am an attending physician at the Children's Hospital of the King's Daughters, and I'm located in Norfolk, Virginia. And I've been down here for about 10 years, and I did all my training up in New York City.
Okay, well, awesome. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me. And I thought it would be really great to hear your perspective, especially because, not only did you grow up with parents who were doctors, but also you work with medical students and trainees a lot who
Yes.
might be considering, or maybe even some pre-med students who might be considering medicine. But what was it like growing up with both of your parents as doctors, and what kind of influence do you think that had on you in terms of your decision to choose medicine?
Well, it was actually, they had a huge influence, but probably not the way most people expect. So I moved to this country when I was younger. My parents did medical college in India, and then they did additional training in England, and then we all moved to the States when I was younger. So it was really just the three of us for a very long time. And as you know, with your mom and many of the folks listening, many times you have to repeat your training. They don't take all kind of like what they call the credits from different countries and things like that. So in my mother's case, she had to repeat part of her residency, and my father had to do some additional training and things like that. So I don't remember too much of it, but they weren't around a lot, kind of just piecing together childcare, having family at all, moving. I think our parents were pretty courageous for moving to this country and not knowing anyone and not having any family. So I just, kind of grew up a lot, sometimes doing things a lot on my own. I was pretty independent. I think it's very different how we raise our kids now. And both of my parents are surgeons. So when we left New York City and then they started their practice, they actually worked together. So there are two different surgical specialties, but they shared office space, and they actually helped each other in the OR. My mom's an obstetrician gynecologist, and my dad's a urologist. So we moved to a very small town. So they were actually just the two of them in their specific specialty. So if my mom had a complicated surgery, my father would help out. So, I was 8, 9 years old. I don't think we do this with our kids now. I'd walk home from school, let myself in. They would be called in the middle of the night. So a lot of times I stayed in the hospital. I was in the hospital sleeping at night. I was sleeping in the office because I didn't want to be home alone. I didn't have a sibling at that point. And ironically, I spent a lot of time in the operating room. I knew all the nurses in the hospital. I knew the switchboard operators. I knew the cafeteria staff. And once I was old enough, I was actually in the OR a lot, both with my mom and dad. I enjoyed both, but I actually enjoyed delivering babies the best. That was obviously the more fun place to be, whether it was in the labor room or with my mom during a C-section, kind of, observing. And then outside of that, when like I said, they had a joint office, I was actually, like you talked about in your story, I was in the office helping out. So this was before EMR. doing filing, doing charting, just kind of helping out where they needed, because what are you supposed to do all summer? So yeah, and like many Indian families, my parents were in an arranged marriage, but it was a little different because my parents, knew each other a little bit before they got married, and they had this similar, background of being physicians, so they connected a lot. So actually, for me, I did not want to go into medicine, and I did not want to marry a doctor because that's all I was surrounded by, and they were in the hospital a lot, and you're establishing yourself in a in a community that is not familiar with Indians. There was a lot of racism where I grew up. And so kind of establishing yourself as physicians and as surgeons and as experts, but also kind of dealing with the racism because we were not white American, quote unquote, and immigrants and things like that. So a lot of my parents' attention and those initial years were difficult. So it was, like you said, it became a family business and things like that. So I actually did not want to become a doctor, and I did not want to marry a doctor. So I am actually 0 for 2 in that department. But that's how it started. And now it's interesting, like we were talking before you logged us in, is that now I'm married to a physician, and I myself now have 3 kids, and I'm kind of in the teenage years. So I have a daughter who's going to be going to college next year, and seeing the flip side of that, how they don't want to go into medicine and they don't want to be physicians, and kind of the interesting aspects between what different groups of friends feel versus kind of like the cultural aspect of being Indian, and kind of that expectation that, like we're supposed to be doctors.
Yeah. So in your case, like, how did you end up deciding to go into medicine then, if you kind of felt pretty actively you didn't want to? Was it that, like your parents really encouraged it, or you just had a change of heart, or you decided when you really thought about it that that was actually what you wanted to do?
Well, I actually went into college as an international economics because I had done all these programs in high school. I had learned Japanese. I had gotten some scholarship programs to learn international studies. And then where I went to school, I started with that. And then you have to take at least where I went to school, you had to take some general, science and math classes. So I think I started with biology. And then I realized I really enjoyed bio and physiology. So I actually was one of the later ones to declare, because back then it seemed like everyone kind of came in pre-med either freshman year or decided soon after. So I actually didn't decide until close to the end of my sophomore year. So I fell in love with biology and physiology. So I kind of finished that pre-med track. And of course, my parents were happy, but they actually didn't really, force it. They were just like, just think about, what you want to do and things like that. So of course, when I declared pre-med track, they were happy. And then I didn't go to med school right away. I kind of had a different kind of path to medical school and residency and things like that. But I think all those, I think myself not having that straight path journey and exploring other things has actually helped me a lot in my career.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, it's really interesting to grow up around medicine. I have a similar story in terms of, like, I grew up hanging out at my mom's office, or kind of being asked to help out there. And I would go, and I grew up around the hospital a lot as well. My mom would take me with her on rounds. And sometimes there was just like a practical reason for it, because she was like, well, you're the only one, I was home and she didn't want me to be home alone. And she's like, come with me on rounds. And so I just went with her, and I would meet some of her patients in the hospital. Being in her office, I would sometimes fill in if her secretary couldn't come in on a Saturday. I'd answer the phones, get to know so many of her patients. And then my dad would do her billing. He's not a physician, but he would do her billing. And my brothers would kind of help out, sometimes help clean up her office. She was like solo private practice, family medicine. And she also had a lot of the similar things that, this was back in the like 80s, 90s, she was facing some, not only gender discrimination being a woman in medicine at that time. I'm sure your mom faced that as well, but then also being the ethnic minority. So she has all sorts of stories of things that were said to her that, were basically inappropriate, and, show that disparity and bias against her as a woman physician, especially as a minority. But but it's interesting growing up around it, because I think, like, in my case too, I was like, I don't know if you and your friends, or your other Indian friends growing up, used to say, oh yeah, our parents are trying to brainwash us to go into medicine. A lot of the people who came from India at that time came on a type of visa that, they were highly skilled workers, right? Like, they were in healthcare, medicine. So a lot of the people who were allowed to immigrate from that time, like, just to give people a historical perspective of why are there so many Indian doctors out there, and I'm Indian as well. You guys can't see me if you're listening on the podcast, but I'm Indian as well, of Indian descent. But the reason why there's so many Indian doctors at that time, especially, was because that was how they were allowed to immigrate here, was because of their, being educated, and there was, I guess, somewhat of a doctor shortage at that time. So that's how they were allowed to come in. And so a lot of us grew up around medicine, and it does kind of become like familiar, and you're like, as you're choosing your career, you're like, well, I know what to expect with this. I know what the hours would be like, what the career would be like. And then you kind of also have an idea of, like, even what kind of salaries you could earn and things like that. And so, we used to kind of joke, like, me and my other Indian friends, like, oh yeah, my parents are trying to brainwash me to go into medicine, and sometimes it would be overt and sometimes it would be subtle. But I think that, that still goes on today. I have people who try to, they'll have like a high school or son or daughter, or maybe they're in their early part of their college years, and they'll say, will you talk to him or her about how great medicine is and how they should go into medicine, almost kind of like they want me to convince them to do it.
Right.
And so I don't know if you've had similar experiences to that.
Yeah, I think but it's interesting. The Indian friends that I grew up around, actually, I think, where their parents probably pushed them a little more, and I wasn't pushed. I'm the only girl in the whole group who became a physician. There was probably like a group of like 5 or 6 of us. So it's ironic because I think one went into dentistry, one became a physician assistant, things like that, and others are in business and law, which are all great professions. But I was, out of everything, I was the only one who became a physician, which is kind of funny to look back on. And then what I'm seeing now, I definitely get a lot of kind of questions from our Indian circle here, our friends, just kind of asking me, like, not necessarily pushing, but like, oh, he has an interest, can you talk to him? And I always say, of course, if they want to come shadow me. So I've had, some high school students come and shadow me. But yeah, sometimes like, oh, talk to them about your field. I usually get a lot, like, can you talk, like, if they're actually interested in medicine or already in medical school. I've had some parents come and talk to me and be like, can you talk to her about how great pediatrics is as a family-friendly profession? Because I think they're thinking long-term about marriage and kids, as opposed to her going into like a surgical profession or more kind of maybe labor-intensive, that they're worried that it'll affect her kind of, I don't know, marriage prospects or something like that. But what we're seeing, like my husband and I are seeing now that, my oldest is looking at colleges and things like that, is we're one of the few couples that both of us are physicians. And I think people are actually shocked that none of our children, at least my daughters, I have 3 kids, my daughters don't want to go into medicine. So they're actually, I don't know if it's a good surprise or a bad surprise, but they're just kind of like, oh, they don't want to go into medicine. We're like, well, no, that's their choice. So, and
yeah,
it's interesting, kind of that impression, like you said, that this expectation, and that, you have 2, she has 2 physician parents. Why wouldn't she want to go into medicine?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think, I think it's an interesting point, because so we've had definitely people on this podcast or on the Women in White Coats that we've interviewed, who were basically like first one to go to college in their family, or first one to become a doctor in their family. And we're kind of at the other end, where we're like, okay, like, I've got tons of doctors in my family. Like, you'd be hard pressed to find anybody, like an electrician or somebody who could like help with like practical things like that. But you can find like all sorts of doctors in my family. Like, my mom's a doctor, my brother's a doctor, and both my mother-in-law and father-in-law are doctors, and my brother-in-law, sister-in-law. I have there's so many doctors in my family. So we're kind of it's kind of like the opposite end of what some other people are experiencing. So that's why I kind of thought that this would be an interesting discussion. I wonder like if we could kind of like help provide some advice for people who might be struggling. And that's one of the things I kind of talk about in my chapter in the book called The Family Business, is how I kind of struggled with the decision. Like, was I going into medicine because it was this unsaid expectation from my parents and my, something that they wanted me to do? Or was I doing it for my own self because it was something that I felt was the right thing for me? And so maybe we can kind of like discuss that, or like maybe you've had, how would you advise students, who are thinking like they're really trying to figure out what is the right thing for them?
I think first and foremost, being on both the parent side, and I work with a lot of, obviously people who think they're interested in pre-med or, going to medical, applying for medical school and things like that. And then we see the same thing when they're applying for residency and things like that. And first and foremost, what I tell them is that don't do something because you think it's going to look good, whether if you think you have to do bench research because it's going to look good on your resume versus learning to, I had a student who was like, well, I really like yoga and I know you like yoga, so I really want to get certified over my summer break, but I feel like I should do research. And I tell everyone, first and foremost, we know when it's not your passion, when it's not natural, when it's just kind of put on there. And so I'll tell you, a handful of high school students who have shadowed me and college students have shadowed me, I could tell right off the bat that they were doing or they're interested in medicine for the wrong reason. And I'll tell you right now, the few that have shadowed me actually did not end up going to med school. So first and foremost, don't feel like you have to do something to impress someone or you feel like it's going to look good on your resume, because we can see right through that. And I think it's going to be very difficult. Like, I can pick out the med students who are probably doing it for the wrong reasons. I can tell which students are maybe doing it for, like you said, familial reasons, or if they think it's a financial reason or whatever they're, versus the kids. I say kids because they could be my kids, but students who are really passionate about it. And I think you can see the difference in those students, the ones that are kind of going like straight through college and have decided they want to be a doctor at 18 versus like now we're seeing what we call the non-traditional student who maybe took the year off, or maybe was, worked as an EMT for a couple of years, or who did some nursing, or, worked in a business or was a teacher. I've had, previous social workers, previous teachers, and then they go into medicine, and you can see the difference right off the bat. You can see that life experience, you can see that passion that they have. And I think that's important. And I know, of course, if there's pressure or expectation from your parents or the family, that's a completely different kind of stress. So I think, like you said, you have to talk to your parents. Like, if you feel, whoever's listening, if you feel like you're being pressured to go into medicine, it's not something to go lightly into, especially as a female. Like I tell my friends, if, my kids, especially if my daughters were interested in medicine, and if they were passionate about it, I would support them 150%. But it's not something to go into lightly, because it is a huge sacrifice. It is a huge sacrifice of your time, your lifestyle, your career, your marriage, your family. You'll be working holidays. You'll be missing events. You will delay having children. You may be delayed getting married, everything like that. And especially for women, and I know we talked a lot about this in the various podcasts and within the book, we sacrifice a lot as women. So if you're going to go into medicine, you really, really have to enjoy it, because it is a very stressful and very rewarding field. But, and I think sometimes, even if there's not a lot of parental pressure, I see a lot of my friends' children now going to college as pre-med when their parents aren't physicians. And I still think there is a huge status symbol to being a physician, especially in like the Indian community, as well as I'm sure in other cultural groups. And I think, if you want to try it out and you like it, that's great, but don't feel like you have to be pressured. And if you feel that way, just to have that honest discussion, with your parents, because as a mom myself, I wouldn't want my children to be unhappy and feel like they were pressured into doing something that, that doesn't make them happy. Because It is a big sacrifice. It is a big sacrifice.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Like if you're going to do medicine, get into medicine, you have to do it for the right reasons because it's something that you ultimately come to a decision, just like you did, that, you know what, you actually like biology and you like physiology and you want to take care of people. Um, it is a huge, it's a long road. That's for
Right.
sure. We both know that, like 4 years of med school, then 3, 4 years of residency or more, and then you get out and it's tough, even once you're out working, like there's still it's such a highly regulated field. I'm actually studying for my board recertification right now. There's never ending stuff. It keeps going and going and going, where you're constantly learning, but you have to enjoy it. Like you have to have, like, it has to be something that you like, you do enjoy and you do love, and you have to do it for the right reasons. That's what I tell people all the time, because it's going to be a really long, painful, track. And I think we've all heard the awful stories of med students like committing suicide and stuff like that. And some of them, maybe it was because they were getting into it for the wrong reasons, or to satisfy parents, or pressures, or whatever it may be. And we don't want that to happen to you. And you know what? In all honesty, there's so many things you can do. And as long as you're like, this is what I tell people. I'm like, you know what? There's a million jobs out there. The most important thing is like you be passionate about what you're doing, because you need that passion to like sustain your career, and to really dive deep into it, and to really, make an impact wherever you may end up,
And it's not about having a job. It's not having about a what we call a job. You want a career, you want a passion, because what's that saying? If you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And that's, I have that framed in my office. So definitely there are tough days and things like that, but I honestly, I tell my husband this all the time. I'm like, we have the best profession. Like we actually make a huge difference. And in some professions, you're like you're saving lives. We're all saving, helping patients, helping families, helping, we're making a large impact, whether it's on the individual patient level or community level, or even, larger, broader scale.
Yeah. And I also think like, it's a huge responsibility, right, to be a doctor. So you have to do it with the right intentions, the right heart, and like, with, and that means that you almost have to see it as a calling. Like it's your duty, it's your duty to do it the right way. And there's going to be a lot of sacrifices that you have to make, and staying up late, and I work night shifts, and leaving my family behind because duty calls, so those are all the sacrifices that you have to make. So it's definitely a commitment. And I hate for people to get started in it and then they finish all their training and they're like, oh my God, this is not what I wanted, so that's why I think like people shadowing is really important, trying to get some exposure early on. Any way that you can, whether it's shadowing or like a lot of people do like their scribes, or they get some, some even are EMTs, or they get some exposure like you were talking about. Sometimes they might get a job.
Yeah.
So I think that is really key, like whether it's an EMT or a tech or something, where they can really get a sense of what it's really like to take care of patients and what the day in and day out is like. But it's a wonderful profession. So it's interesting. You kind of mentioned about your kids. I have 2 little ones, and my daughter is actually 7. My son is 9. He doesn't really say much about wanting to go into medicine. He wants to be like a race car driver. But my daughter,
they're little still.
my daughter who's 7, she's like, I want to be exactly what you are, Mommy, everything that you are. And I was like, and I come home from night shift and she's like, Mommy, I want to work night shift too. And I'm like, no, you don't. You do not want to work night shift. If you don't have to, but it's
they're little.
I know. Yeah, totally. I know she's going to change her mind a million times, but I actually feel like I just, I feel different than my parents did. Like I know my mom and dad really wanted me to become a doctor, but I feel like you. I don't want to push them. I want them to do it for the right reasons. And if it's something that's truly inherent to them that they really feel like, they'd be great at, then, so be it. I would definitely support them, whatever they end up choosing. But I think that's the key as a parent too, because we're both parents, is just really supporting our kids in the decisions that they make, because, like them being happy in what they choose is so important, and feeling fulfilled in their life, and happy in their life. So.
And I think for like whoever's listening, like if, whether you're thinking about medicine, or if you're in the process, or the flip side, if you're a parent who has a child. And I think what I unfortunately see a lot of, and you mentioned it, like with the stress of med school, or even like the stress of pre-meds, and some of the high rates of depression, anxiety, and suicide. And I've seen this with college kids who are kind of like really gung-ho that pre-med track, and then they decide not to go. I was just talking to a student, and that the student decided not to go pre-med, which I kind of figured it out I just knew. I felt like this person was doing it for not the right reasons, and what he said to me was like, but everyone expected me to be a doctor. And it wasn't his parental expectation. It wasn't a cultural issue. It was just that he had been talking about it so much since he was a kid. And he felt like, what was everyone going to think? What was everyone going to say? And I know we see that a lot in our Indian communities. And sometimes what I told him is like, then you need new friends, because if your friends actually care that you ended up going to go get your PhD instead of your MD, then, you basically, I told him, I said, you just basically need new friends then, because that's not who you should surround yourself with. But, partly joking, but, I said, you can't worry. So, for those of you who are maybe starting out that track and you realize like halfway into it that this isn't for you, it's okay. Like, it's okay. There are other things you can do with that, bio degree. And now you don't even have to major in a science like many of us did. Like, you can major in something else and do the pre-med track. And if you decide not to do it, it's okay. No one's going to look down on you. I know students who have taken the MCAT and then decided along the way, like, I don't want to do med school. And I think it's better to find out before you enter med school. And then, of course, like you mentioned, the time, but also the debt, because I see that firsthand with a lot of students who accrue, 4 years of debt. A private med school can be $250,000. And then you have to think of the students if they, don't make it through the first year, if they don't pass their exams and things like that. So, a lot of times students are taking 4.5 to 5 years, and that's a lot of debt. So, it's better to always, if you have that inkling, talk to, like, find a mentor, talk to someone. And it's okay if you decide to, this isn't for me. Because if people are thinking, you said you're going to do medicine, you can't worry about what everyone else thinks. You have to, and if you know that earlier, then it's better to do that, as opposed to, like you said, going through med school, going through residency, and realizing, how many stories do we see, Archana, that they finish med school and then they're halfway through residency and they're like, oh my God, this is not what I wanted to do. And it's like, at that point, you've gone through so much, and it's like, you have to finish, because, we have debt, we have bills, things like that. There are certain responsibilities we have then after we become a physician.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really, really good point. But yeah, I mean, I like the point of just, hey, you know what, it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to have a change of course. And, maybe if it really isn't for you, then that's fine too. I mean, I know that can be a really tough decision to make, but, and then we also see people, we see a lot of doctors who come out and they decide that they don't want to practice clinically, and then there's so many other options. There's non-clinical things that you can do with that degree still. So it's not like all lost, all the education. It's still something that you learn. It's still something that's going to help you, and you could put it to use in other ways. Well, even if it means like practicing non-clinically, or maybe you take those few years of med school that you did and do something else with it. So I think, no education is truly ever wasted. There's definitely the financial implication, but, and even still we see people, right, Natasha, like who come out of residency who are like, wow, like, I just don't want to practice clinically. I'm going to figure out something else to do with my degree. And they're fine. They figure out something else. So don't feel like it's the end of the world if you decide to change your mind. And we are always humans, evolving and changing, and life changes, right? We're going through different life stages too. Maybe we get married or we have kids, and that can definitely, as we've talked about before, change things a lot too. So, but you know what? Thanks so much, Natasha, for talking about this topic. I think it was a really great discussion. I loved hearing your, take on it and how you grew up, and about your, growing up in the OR and everything. I didn't even know that part about you, but that's so really cool. But thanks so much for taking time out, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me. And then, again, reach out to us on the blog, and, really finding a good mentor is really key. And I know we talk about that a lot. So thanks everyone. Have a great day.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.